Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. Emma had always believed that some moments could change everything. She just never imagined it would happen on the night she was supposed to celebrate her engagement to the man she thought she loved. The riverside manor was bathed in golden light, its sprawling gardens alive with the gentle hum of conversation and clinking glasses. Emma stood on the terrace, watching the celebration unfold before her. 3 months of planning had led to this moment, her engagement party to David Sterling, the successful architect who had swept her off her feet with his charm and stability. She touched the diamond ring on her finger, its weight feeling heavier than usual. David was everything she had convinced herself she wanted. Reliable, ambitious, and completely devoted to her. Their relationship had been a steady climb toward this inevitable conclusion, built on shared goals and mutual respect rather than the wild, consuming passion she had once dreamed of. "There you are." David's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar. "Everyone's been asking for the happy bride-to-be." Emma turned, forcing a smile that felt more natural than it should. Just taking it all in. "It's beautiful, David. Thank you for making this so special." He moved closer, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Nothing's too good for my future wife." His lips brushed against her temple, a gesture that should have filled her with warmth, but instead felt like a gentle routine they had perfected over the months. "Your brother seems to be enjoying himself," Emma observed, nodding toward the crowd where she could see a tall figure moving through the guests with an easy confidence that made people gravitate toward him. David's arms tightened slightly around her. Michael always does. He has this way of making everyone feel like they're the most important person in the room. There was something in his tone, not quite jealousy, but perhaps a hint of the complicated dynamic that existed between the Sterling brothers. Emma had heard about Michael countless times over the past year of dating David, but she had never actually met him. David's older brother was a travel photographer, constantly chasing stories and light across different continents. He lived a life that seemed to exist in stark contrast to David's carefully planned existence. "I should probably go mingle," Emma said, though she found herself reluctant to leave the quiet sanctuary of the terrace. "In a minute," David murmured, his voice taking on a quality she recognized as his attempt at romance. "I want to tell you something first." But before he could continue, a voice interrupted them, deep, amused, and carrying an undertone that made Emma's pulse quicken without warning. "David, you can't keep the guest of honor hidden away all evening." Emma turned in David's arms to see him approaching, the man who had been commanding attention inside. Michael Sterling was nothing like what she had imagined. Where David was neat and polished, Michael carried himself with a relaxed elegance that spoke of someone comfortable in his own skin. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he had been running his hands through it, and his eyes held a warmth and depth that seemed to take in everything at once. But it was the way he looked at her that made Emma's breath catch. Not the polite, appreciative glance of a future brother-in-law, but something deeper, a recognition that felt impossible and immediate. "Michael," David said, his voice tight with something Emma couldn't quite identify. "Emma, this is my brother. Michael, meet." "Emma." Michael stepped forward, extending his hand, and Emma found herself moving toward him, as if drawn by some invisible force. When their fingers touched, the contact sent a jolt through her that she was certain he felt too, because his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "It's wonderful to finally meet you," Michael said, his voice softer now, meant just for her. "David's told me so much about you, but he failed to mention." He paused, his gaze holding hers. "He failed to mention how radiant you are." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, and she was acutely aware that David was watching this exchange with growing tension. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've heard so much about your work. David says you're incredibly talented." "I capture moments," Michael said, still holding her hand. "Though I have a feeling some moments are more worth capturing than others." The weight of his words settled between them, and Emma realized that something fundamental had shifted. In the space of a few seconds, this was dangerous territory, the kind of attraction that could upend carefully constructed lives. David cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Michael just got back from New Zealand yesterday. He almost missed the party." "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," Michael said, finally releasing Emma's hand. But his eyes remained on her face, and she felt exposed in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, toasts, and polite conversation, but Emma found herself constantly aware of Michael's presence. He moved through the crowd with the easy grace of someone who had learned to adapt to any situation, but she caught him watching her more than once, his expression unreadable. When the last guest had gone home and the caterers had finished clearing away the remnants of the celebration, Emma found herself alone in the garden. David had gone inside to handle some last-minute details with the venue coordinator, leaving her with her thoughts and the lingering scent of jasmine in the night air. She had kicked off her heels and was walking barefoot through the grass when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Michael. "Beautiful night," he said, coming to stand beside her. They were far enough from the house that the sounds of cleanup faded into the background, leaving them in their own private world. "It is," Emma agreed, though she was finding it hard to concentrate on anything other than his presence beside her. "Can I ask you something?" Michael's voice was careful, as if he were walking across thin ice. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. "Ah, you happy?" The question hung in the air between them, simple and yet loaded with implications that made Emma's heart race. She could have given him the easy answer, of course she was happy. She was engaged to a wonderful man who loved her. She had everything she was supposed to want. Instead, she found herself saying, "I thought I was. Until tonight." Michael turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight she could see the conflict written across his features. "Emma... I know," she whispered. "I know this is wrong. I know I shouldn't feel this way." "But you do feel it," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. They stood there in the darkness, the weight of unspoken feelings pressing between them. Emma could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the pull toward him like a physical force. "I should go," she said, but she made no move to leave. "You should," Michael agreed, but he stepped closer instead of backing away. "David is your brother," Emma said, as if reminding herself of the impossibility of what she was feeling. "I know who he is," Michael replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I also know that what I'm feeling right now isn't something I can ignore or explain away." Emma closed her eyes, trying to center herself, but when she opened them, Michael was even closer. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "One look," she whispered. "That's all it took." "One look," he agreed, his hand lifting to trace the line of her jaw with a tenderness that made her shiver. And then, as if drawn by forces beyond their control, they were kissing. It wasn't gentle or tentative, it was desperate and consuming. The kind of kiss that spoke of recognition and longing and the terrible beauty of timing gone wrong. Emma felt herself melt against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as if she could anchor herself to this moment. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and she could taste the wine on his lips, could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, staring at each other with a mixture of wonder and horror at what they had just done. "Emma," Michael said, his voice broken. "I know," she whispered, pressing her fingers to her lips as if she could still feel the kiss there. "I know." The sound of the back door opening made them spring apart, and David's voice carried across the garden. "Emma? Are you out here?" Emma's mind reeled as she tried to process what had just happened. She was engaged to David Sweet, devoted. David, who had spent months planning this perfect evening. And yet, in the space of a few hours, everything had changed. "I'm here," she called back, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. David appeared at the edge of the garden, his smile warm and unsuspecting. "There you are. I was wondering where you'd gone." Emma glanced at Michael, who had stepped back into the shadows. His expression was unreadable, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I was just getting some air," she said, bending to retrieve her shoes. "It's been such a wonderful night." "It has," David agreed, moving to wrap an arm around her shoulders. "I can't wait to start planning the wedding." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. The wedding, the life she had committed to building with David, the future that, just hours ago, had seemed so certain and right. "David," she began, but found she couldn't continue. What could she possibly say? That she had just kissed his brother. That one moment of connection had shattered everything she thought she knew about herself and what she wanted. "I should go," Michael said, stepping out of the shadows. "Congratulations again, both of you. You make a beautiful couple." The words were perfectly appropriate, but Emma could hear the pain beneath them. She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the darkness, and felt as if part of her soul was walking away with him. "He seems different," David mused, apparently oblivious to the undercurrents that had just played out before him. "Travel changes people, I suppose." Emma nodded mutely, her mind racing. She had always prided herself on being honest, on making decisions based on logic and careful consideration. But nothing about this situation could be approached logically. Over the next few weeks, Emma tried to return to her normal routine. She threw herself into wedding planning with a determination that bordered on desperation, as if choosing flowers and selecting menus could somehow erase the memory of that kiss in the garden. But Michael's presence lingered in her thoughts like a song she couldn't shake. She found herself wondering where he was, what he was photographing, whether he thought about that night as much as she did. David, blissfully unaware of the turmoil beneath his fiancée's composed exterior, was happier than she had ever seen him. He talked excitedly about their future, about the house they would buy, the children they would have. Each conversation felt like another chain binding Emma to a life that suddenly felt foreign to her. "I was thinking we could have the ceremony in the rose garden at Willow Creek," David said one evening over dinner. "It's where my parents were married." Emma looked up from her untouched plate, realizing she had been lost in thought again. "That sounds lovely," she managed. "You're not eating," David observed, concern creasing his features. "Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine," Emma lied. "Just tired from all the planning." But she wasn't fine. She was drowning in a sea of conflicting emotions, torn between the life she had built and the possibility of something she had never dared to imagine. The crisis came 3 weeks later, when Michael called David to say he was back in town and wanted to take his brother to lunch. Emma was at David's apartment when the call came, and she watched his face light up with genuine pleasure. "Michael's back," he announced after hanging up. "He wants to catch up. You should come with us." Emma's heart stopped. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? David asked, puzzled. I thought you two got along well at the party. We did, Emma said carefully. I just think brothers should have some time alone. But David was already shaking his head. Nonsense. You're going to be family soon. Besides, Michael specifically asked about you. The words sent a thrill through Emma that she tried desperately to suppress. He did? He wanted to know how the wedding planning was going, David said, missing the way Emma's face fell. I think he's feeling guilty about missing so much of our engagement. An hour later, Emma found herself sitting across from Michael in a small bistro downtown, trying to pretend that her hands weren't shaking as she reached for her water glass. He looked even more handsome than she remembered, his skin slightly tanned from whatever adventure had taken him away. So, David said, cutting into his sandwich with enthusiasm, tell us about New Zealand. Did you get the shots you were hoping for? Michael's eyes flickered to Emma before returning to his brother. I got some good work done, but I found myself thinking about home more than usual. Really? David seemed surprised. That's not like you. No, Michael agreed quietly. It's not. The conversation continued around Emma, but she was acutely aware of the tension radiating from Michael, of the way he carefully avoided looking at her directly. When David excused himself to take a business call, they were left alone at the table. How are you? Michael asked, his voice low and intimate. Emma's breath caught. I'm fine. Are you? He leaned forward slightly, and she caught a hint of his. Cologne something woodsy and warm that made her think of that night in the garden. I'm engaged, she said, as if reminding herself. That's not what I asked. Emma met his eyes for the first time since he had sat down, and the intensity there nearly undid her. No, she whispered. I'm not fine. Michael's jaw tightened. Emma. I can't stop thinking about it, she interrupted, her voice barely audible. About that night. About you. Neither can I, he admitted, and the pain in his voice was unmistakable. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared secret pressing down on them. Emma could see David through the window, pacing, as he talked on his phone, completely unaware that his entire world was balancing on a knife's edge. I've been thinking about leaving again, Michael said suddenly. Emma's heart lurched. What? There's a photography assignment in South America. 6 months, maybe longer. I think it would be best if I took it. You're running away, Emma said, and she couldn't keep the accusation out of her voice. I'm being responsible, Michael replied, but there was no conviction in his words. For who? For David? For me? Emma's voice was rising, and she forced herself to lower it. Or for yourself? Michael's hands clenched on the table. All of us. This situation is impossible, Emma. We both know it. So you're just going to disappear? Leave me to marry your brother and pretend that nothing happened? What's the alternative? Michael asked, his voice rough with emotion. That we destroy David's life because we can't control ourselves. That we tear apart a family because of one moment of weakness. Emma flinched at the word weakness, but before she could respond, David was sliding back into his seat, his phone call finished. Sorry about that, he said cheerfully. Where were we? For the rest of the lunch, Emma barely spoke. She watched the interplay between the brothers, saw the genuine affection David had for Michael, and felt the weight of her betrayal settling deeper into her bones. As they prepared to leave, Michael turned to David. I've been offered an assignment in South America. I'll probably be gone for the better part of a year. David's face fell. But what about the wedding? When is it? Michael asked, though Emma was certain he already knew. October 15th, David said. I was hoping you'd be my best man. Emma watched Michael's face go pale. David, I don't think... Please, David interrupted, and his voice held a vulnerability that made Emma's heart ache. It would mean everything to me. You're my brother, my best friend. I can't imagine getting married without you there. Michael looked at Emma, and she saw the moment he made his decision. Of course, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil she could see in his eyes. I'll be there. As they said their goodbyes outside the restaurant, Michael caught Emma's hand for just a moment. Be happy, he whispered, and there was a finality in his voice that made her chest tighten. Michael, she began, but he was already walking away, his figure disappearing into the crowd. The weeks that followed were a blur of dress fittings, menu tastings, and sleepless nights. Emma went through the motions of wedding planning with mechanical precision, but her heart felt hollow. She had convinced herself that seeing Michael again would somehow break the spell, would prove that what she felt was just infatuation brought on by the romance of the engagement party. Instead, it had only confirmed what she already knew. She was in love with the wrong brother. The realization hit her one evening as she sat in her apartment, surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric samples. She wasn't just attracted to Michael, she was completely, irrevocably in love with him. And in 3 weeks, she was going to marry David. She thought about calling off the wedding, about finding the courage to tell David the truth. But every time she imagined his face, imagined the pain and betrayal in his eyes, she lost her nerve. David loved her with a pure, uncomplicated devotion that she had never deserved. And she couldn't bear the thought of destroying that dot, so she did what she had always done when faced with impossible choices. She tried to be practical. She would marry David, she would build a good life with him, and she would learn to forget about Michael, Sterling, and the way he had made her feel alive, in a way she had never experienced before. It was a plan that might have worked, if fate hadn't intervened in the form of a phone call 2 days before the wedding. Emma was at the church, overseeing the final decorations, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer it anyway. Emma? The voice was Michael's, and it sounded strained. Michael, she breathed, her heart immediately racing. Where are you? I'm at the hospital, he said, and Emma's blood ran cold. There's been an accident. The next few hours passed in a haze of fear and confusion. Emma raced to the hospital, her wedding dress still hanging in her car from the final fitting. She found David in the waiting room, his face pale with shock. What happened? She asked, sinking into the chair beside him. Car accident, David said, his voice flat. A drunk driver hit him head-on. The doctors say he's going to be okay, but... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Emma felt the world tilt around her. The thought of losing Michael, of never seeing him again, was unbearable. Can I see him? David nodded. He's been asking for you. Emma's steps felt leaden as she walked down the hospital corridor. Michael was in a private room, his left arm in a cast and his face bruised but alert. When he saw her, his eyes filled with an emotion so intense it took her breath away. Emma, he said, his voice hoarse. She moved to his bedside, her hands trembling. As she reached for his uninjured hand, I was so scared, she whispered, when David said there had been an accident. I know, Michael said, his fingers tightening around hers. I kept thinking about you, about what I never said. Michael, don't, Emma said, but her protest was weak. I have to, he insisted. I almost died tonight, Emma, and all I could think about was how I let you go, how I let you walk into a marriage with a man you don't love. I do love David, Emma said, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Not the way you love me, Michael said, and the quiet certainty in his voice broke something inside her. Emma sank into the chair beside his bed, tears streaming down her face. It doesn't matter, she said. I'm getting married tomorrow. You? Michael asked. Or are you just going through the motions because it's easier than admitting what you really want? Emma looked at him through her tears, seeing the man who had turned her world upside down with a single look. What I want doesn't matter. David is your brother. He loves me. How can I hurt him like this? How can you hurt yourself like this? Michael countered. Emma, love isn't about what's easy or convenient. It's about finding the person who makes you feel whole. And you think that's you? Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Michael's eyes never left hers. I know it is. Just like I know that you're mine. And I'm yours. And no amount of trying to do the right thing is going to change that. The truth of his words hit Emma like a physical blow. She had been so focused on not hurting David that she had forgotten to consider her own happiness, her own truth. I can't, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You can, Michael said gently. You just have to be brave enough to choose love over duty. Emma sat in the hospital room for hours, holding Michael's hand and wrestling with the biggest decision of her life. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise on what was supposed to be her wedding day, and as the first light of dawn crept through the window, Emma Sterling, soon to be Emma Hamilton, realized that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is listen to your heart, even when it's telling you to turn your whole world upside down. The choice she made in that hospital room would change everything. But for the first time in months, Emma felt like she was finally, truly awake. What will Emma choose? Will she follow her heart and risk everything for love? Or will she walk down the aisle and marry the wrong brother? The answer lies in the courage to embrace a love that was meant to be, even if it means shattering the careful plans of a lifetime.